Oh, 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 I was having this terrible dream. But I'm glad it was just a dream. Or was it? Oh! Hello one, hello all, it's the gothiest ghost of them all, Casper in the flesh, and it's time for a review of No Worries. Why, Lord? No Worries is a duo consisting of singer, songwriter, multi-instrumentalist Anderson .Paak and producer Knowledge. They both had a meeting of the minds back in 2017, dropping their debut album, Yes Lord, which was the first installment, and now we're on the second, which I found to be enjoyable. However, I didn't walk away loving it. I did wish there was more in terms of sonic composition, song structure, and on here, I honestly got my wish. And I was fond of the funk, the neo-soul elements. It was very sexy and certainly very flirty and also very fun, which does show up here, but given how this album is taking a nocturnal tone, a depressive tone involving divorce, trauma, depression, heartbreak, that wouldn't be a very appropriate fit. Now would it? As you can tell by the title, Why Lord, this album does come from a place of anguish, of coping. But it's not too over the top, it's not too melodramatic, it's not too goofy, but it does certainly show conflicts, trials and tribulations, whether it's with his ex or whether it's with Knowledge himself. Yes, even the producer of this thing. So while the lyrical content does consist of sex, drugs, drinking, and spending, it's all in the context of healing, of therapy, of reconciling with loss, in opposed to celebratory gain. And as far as the features here, the features are great, like Thundercat on Keeper, that really draws the narrative of the story here, which is the unfortunate divorce of Anderson .Paak and his wife, as he's drawing painful suspicions, coping with his grief while simultaneously having these conflicts of emotions, and also reconciling with the fact that money will not keep this relationship going. Money will not get this person back. It's definitely a sobering moment, and you definitely experience all the steps of grievance in one track. It's really amazing. The whole instrumental is very nocturnal, very gloomy, and also soulful as well. It does drag on a bit, but I definitely feel it is an important track for the album. And we even have instrumental cuts here, such as Lookin', which is an interlude, sure, but it's certainly a very beautiful, dreamy moment on the album, and a very forlorn one as well. That certainly reminds me of J Dilla Donuts, especially with the sonic parallels of the bass and drums. And there's also the closer, which Knowledge definitely knows how to complement the theme of the album and wrap things up, with a nice hazy sax solo at the end. And we also have great chemistry between multi-instrumentalist and singer Her on the song Where I Go, that really takes things into a comprehensive response moment of her pain and moving on, sharing her frustration of Anderson's lyrics, of this being a very introspective moment, of a very honest moment where Anderson .Paak is showing his flaws, his toxicity, and definitely tells a story here. And I love the plucky, watery strum guitars, and the fat bass is a nice touch too. Like, I love the hypnotic soulfulness of this track. Draws almost a dreamlike vibe, which also does appear on another part of this album, but we'll get into that. And there's also From Here, which is a psychedelic heavenly track singing about a hellish situation. And that's one thing this album does too. This album really does take lemons and turn them into lemonade, as Anderson is in the mental state of desolation and lack of direction, drinking to ease the pain of loss, which I alluded to earlier, just yearning for love and admiration, with these bittersweet melodies, soaring backing falsettos, and I believe Snoop in the background going, "Ooh, baby." And Anderson's gravelly, passionate croons just remind me of a dead ringer of Bobby Womack, but in a good way. And Snoop's narration at the end definitely seals the vintage Motown deal on this. Really nails the vintage, old school narration perfectly. And Walk On By shares a very pained confessional moment of Anderson .Paak here, and also Earl Sweatshirt, which is an actual heartfelt message to the producer himself of this album, Knowledge, putting aside his past conflicts, reconciling with him, admitting his wrongs, pretty much making amends, as Earl is reaching out to his friends and apologizing for his wrongdoings, and also being aware of his criticisms of others. The whole track really does reflect on apologizing, moving on, getting better, sharing inner turmoil, but also progressing along with it, with some bluesy chords, heavy bass, and watery arpeggios. The whole thing is just so soulful, beautiful, and soul-crushing from front to back. That features a very passionate performance from vocalist Ray Khalil, who also kills it on Out of the Way, which is a very dense lo-fi R&B slow jam. Again, I do think this definitely has the J Dilla DNA, but in Knowledge's own way, with a very throwback, serene vaporwave palette. It's alluring, it's entrancing, and probably the most romantically endearing song on here. And the only guest appearance I could have really done without is Dave Chappelle, with a very pointless, empty spoken word piece from him. And with his disgusting transphobic rants, the Elon Musk bootlicking, and his NIMBY activity. And then saying God is the reason for his fortune and the reason why other people are misfortunate because they're not thanking God. And letting God be a decider of who's gonna be less fortunate or fortunate based on their gratitude of him. It just really leaves a bad taste in my mouth. And the fact that he would actually say this after all the horrible shit he said, I think is comedy within itself. And yes, Anderson can be flirty on here, he can be sexual, he can be sensual, and even humorous on here too, which he certainly expresses on Fall Through. That has some sweet vocal lines, glimmering guitar embellishments, with crispy drums, and the lyrics are very intimate, they're very seducing, but it's very intoxicating with its lyrical content. It really has me thinking, is he talking to a woman or is he talking to alcohol? It's kind of easy to draw comparisons here and be a little lost in concept, but it's still a highlight for me. And I think Here I Am really does show Anderson's comedic side more, and it really shows how Anderson is really good at pulling humor out of a tragic situation, as his mom is calling him stupid for messing things up with his wife, how he has to move because the lease is in her name, friends checking on him, making sure he's doing all right. He's on her page and he's saying like, oh, this whole time I thought that your friend was taking the picture, but it turns out the new man in your life is taking the picture, and I just wanted to see how you were doing. I mean, it is kind of awkward, but yet there's humor involved. I think he plays it off well. And just trying to swallow the fact that she's moved on. And making questionable decisions within the breakup, which I hope he's not doing. And I feel like what this album does right here, it really does show the fantastic chemistry between Anderson and Knowledge due to the fact of how one could play off the other. How Anderson creates a really heartbreaking trip down memory lane with Daydreamin', which has these fuzzy organ chords, dreamy guitar strums, distorted droning riffs that sounds immensely vintage, which does correlate to a flashback, with an absolutely fiery arpeggiated solo that really creates the painful reminiscent of Pac, where he's having flashbacks of when he was with his past partner, asking for a kiss so he knows it's real, looking for that affirmation of love and commitment. It's very heart-wrenching and very powerful, and it really does show the emotional range that Anderson .Paak has and how he basically tackles every emotion here damn near perfect, which is making the theme mostly land, which I feel transitions smoothly into From Here. Battlefield is another highlight, where it shows Anderson reflecting on family, generational trauma, talking about his upbringing, his alcoholism, and growing up to flip the cards he was dealt, and being determined to prosper, fighting for survival and finding happiness over a chunky, soulful bass line that has a meditative arpeggio. And I feel the performance from Anderson and the guest vocalist really steal the show here. And there's also more of it that has these decadent strings and shows Anderson in a better mental state. This does somewhat have some silver lining here, some light at the end of the tunnel, as Anderson talks about paying off his mom's mortgage, which is nice, even though she still has other struggles ahead of her. So yeah, I feel like this is really a fantastic combination, a very great collaboration where the composition has improved greatly, a lot of focus, and I feel like Anderson has taken a heartbreaking situation and turned it into an enjoyable project with the help of Knowledge, who killed it in terms of production on here. Sure, there are some tracks that I do feel pale in comparison to others, but this is honestly one of the best R&B albums I've heard in like a while. Probably gonna be my R&B soul album of the year, we'll see. But definitely No Worries' best album yet, and probably Anderson .Paak's best album yet. I'm feeling a 4 out of 5 Black Hearts on this album. If you've given this a listen, what did you think? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Why? And that's it. Caspa, Gothic Ghost, No Worries, Why Lord? Till we meet again.